We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters, the three amigos, the perfect way to kickstart your Newcastle United weekend. And I might be under the weather, but George, Steve and Mitch are fighting fit and ready to go for the next 2 hours of NUFC Matters chat. And just breaking news for Manchester United, Højlund, who has certainly been one of the mainstays in Manchester United's climb up the table in recent weeks, is injured. Out for 2 to 3 weeks. Not that we ever like to see people get injured, but maybe that might put a spoke in Manchester United's wheels for the next few weeks anyway, because he certainly made a difference and found the back of the net on more than one occasion. So we'll watch that with interest. Okay, lads. As always, plenty to talk about. I'm not going to start with Dan Ashworth. We had enough of that last week. It was covered in Eddie Howe's press conference today, though, and if you haven't had time to watch it, lads, I'll give you an abridged version. It was one of the shortest press conferences I think we've had since Eddie Howe came to the club. Really, because some of his answers were one-word answers, not in an obnoxious kind of way. He was asked on numerous occasions by a variety of journalists about the Dan Ashworth situation. He was asked, had he spoken to him since he'd been put on garden leave? No, he said at first, and then went yes. Obviously, clearly remembering the one time he did speak to him. Would you tell us what that conversation was? No, that's between us. Have you left on good terms? Yes. So you get the picture. Anything with regards to Ashworth was handled this week as it should have been last week. But Eddie Howe handled it the way he wanted to handle it today, and I thought it was much better. The good news is that Alexander Isak and Joe Willock, Fabian Schär have all trained this week and should all be okay for some kind of involvement tomorrow. Obviously, there was one more training session today, which we will see what happens tomorrow with his team selection. He was quizzed on the left back situation. Good question, I thought. Asked about the Livramento situation. What does Livramento have to do to get into the team? Continue when he comes on, play well, is what Eddie said. Again, he was asked about in roundabout ways about, do you see him as a left back? He said he's a good. I see him as a full back. Wouldn't get thrown into anything. But again, we still got very little answer out of Eddie Howe about this whole Dan Burn Livramento situation. He's not one for throwing players under the bus, and rightly so. Will he change it tomorrow? We will have to wait and see. The rest of the questions in the press conference today didn't really give us a great deal. They were focusing too much on Arteta and Arsenal and the way that they'd reacted to the controversial goal at St James's Park. You know, one journalist, I think it was Jordan at the end, had talked about you know, squaring up, or was it Martin Hardy? I think it was squaring up to Arteta. The last time that they played, he says, well, you've got a different recollection of it than I have. But it was, in general, look, we didn't learn a great deal from this press conference at all. Only that, you know, he wishes Dan well. They've left amicably. He's focused on the football, which we know he is. He's happy that the players are back, and he's not going to tell you whether he thinks whether Dan Burn or Tino should be playing at left back, and you'll just have to wait and see tomorrow. So we didn't learn a great deal today, George. We very rarely do in press conferences, and we've got to know, you know, that Eddie, you know, plays his cards close to his chest. But just overall an assessment of what we heard from Eddie today.
Well, Steve, I agree with you. I don't know whether he did have any press training or anything while he was on his sabbatical from football, but it looks awfully like it to me, because he handles it so well. He very rarely gets ruffled. The only time I've seen it ruffled is when they started asking the geopolitical questions about Saudi Arabia, and that's all long gone. I think they're getting sick of that themselves. So, no, I agree with you. He handles it so well. Doesn't give anything away. What he does give away is stuff we know already. He's not giving it away, really. He's just embellishing what we know. And that's fine. I can live with that. The only thing I slightly disagree with you about is the Dan Burn thing. He doesn't throw players under the bus. Well, he did on Saturday. He took them off straight after that goal went in. And you could see Dan Burn wasn't very happy about that. And it's unusual for Dan Burn to react. So I think substituting them in that way hurt Dan Burn a little bit, and he should have been more thoughtful about it. I'm not saying he was wrong to substitute him. He probably was right to give the lad a break. But, yeah, no, you know, you're right what he's saying. There isn't any... anything to be gleaned from it. And of course, the reporters are after lineage, aren't they? That's all they're interested in. And if they can trip him up or get a couple of lines out of him, well, they're happy. But he's good at avoiding that. And as to the Dan Ashworth thing, there's been so much floating about whether Dan Ashworth liked Eddie and Eddie liked Dan Ashworth and vice versa. Well, he's not going to give any of that away. He's a professional. And that's what I like about him. He's very professional about how he does it. My God, couldn't he cause a ruckus if he said, oh, well, yeah, he brought this player and I didn't bloody want him, you know. We're not going to get a Keegan Cisco situation, you know, where Cisco turns up on the training ground and Keegan didn't even know he's coming. No, we're not going to get any of that, thank God. He's more professional than that. And even he did have something to say. He's not going to say it. So we're back to the same old phrase, aren't we? Trust in Eddie, trust in the process. And I think that's what we've got today. We've got the same old Eddie, and it's an Eddie we can rely on. And I think that's very important for the football club, very important for players, and very important for the fans because they know what they're going to get out of the manager. Nothing worse than having somebody, well, like the previous guy who, you know, if he had something to say, it was usually to blame everybody but him. But not this one. No. I like these press conferences. It's refreshing to see a football manager that can engage with the press like that and not be tripped up, because that's all they're after. That's all they're after. So that's my assessment, Steve.
Steve, it's interesting. George says they like to get a headline, but that's obviously the journalist's job. We did focus a little bit on Lewis Hall again today. People wondering why. It was a guy I'd never heard of, actually. I think his name was Tom. They didn't quite catch it at the start of the coverage on Newcastle United's YouTube, but it was somebody from Radio Newcastle, and I only gleaned that A, because the guy was first, and B, because he mentioned that on Total Sport, some fans had said that's how he got his question in. But he was asking about Lewis Hall. And it's interesting because the answer he gave about Lewis Hall, is he anywhere nearer getting to where you want to so that he can be involved in the team? Yes, he's getting nearer, was what he said. And later on, he was asked about the the rumor that was circulating that, you know, could he be deemed an academy signing, which could help us with FFP? And his answer to that was, you'll have to speak to someone who knows about those kind of things. It's something I'm unaware of. So again, we've got no answers at all on the Lewis Hall situation. Now, my mindset was the answer to the question that he gave today was he's getting closer to the team. The line that the local newspaper ran with was the contract's nearly sorted. How on earth they came to the conclusion that the contract's nearly sorted from he's closer to the team, I'd love to know. But that's what they came out with this afternoon. So yeah, strange. But yeah, I digress. Give us your views on the press conference, Steve.
You're dead right, Steve. That's exactly the immediate thought I had when I read up what the press were coming back with. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. What I did glean from it was that we're playing Arsenal on Saturday. I learned that, which was good. And apart from that, he gave absolutely nothing else away, did he? I've never known a press conference, as you say, so short. What it did, I think, show was that Eddie's in charge. Full stop. Nobody else. Eddie's in charge. He's got a smile on his face, which is interesting. He's always a very cheery sort of, not, I wouldn't say happy-go-lucky, but he's very much a friendly persona. But I think what we saw was a business-like, I'm in charge now, guys. From now on, it's me. Whether the press in the forthcoming weeks will read anything into that, who knows? I'm sure that plenty podcasters will read something into it. If they've picked up on the same wavelength as I'm picking up on. I'm sure plenty of the people who are watching tonight might pick up on that and have their own opinions. I mean, Mitch and myself and your good self have spoken about it many a time over the last sort of, well, probably since the close season, and about incomings and outgoings. You know, there was a lot of border contention over whether we were going to get Maddison. There was Tonali. Is it Maddison? Tonali came out to left field right at the end. And we've always questioned whether or not Tonali was ever on the radar until everybody else fell away. And then obviously the Tonali situation arises, and we have all those issues that have occurred around the player. And certainly people have spoken about due diligence, how deeply we went into it, whether we jumped in too quickly, where does the finger point? And all I'll say is Dan Ashworth's on gardening leave. Eddie Howe's very much in charge.
Yeah, it is a strange situation, that whole gardener leave thing, and we'll come to that, I'm sure, as time goes on. A few questions coming in about that all, but yeah, Mitch, short press conference. Eddie really just stamped his authority, but also just showing that football's first and foremost in his mind and nothing else.
Yeah, and you say there's a difference between this conference and the previous one. I'll tell you what the difference is. It's clarity on the position of Dan Ashworth.
Mm.
When there was ambiguity, he was obviously not in a position to be as straight as yes, no, black, white. Now we know what the position is. He's asked to leave. And we're at this point where he's going to, unless something changes, sit through a period of gardening leave, and therefore Eddie was given answers from a much stronger position, from a position of clarity, and pretty much talking about Ashworth as yesterday's man. It's that simple. And that's one of the things that we've lacked during this period, is clarity. And one of the things I've been critical of about the club needing to take control of the narrative. And so, in some respects, certain things have just been allowed to happen, but that's then given the clarity. For Eddie to come across quite more bullish, I would say, is the word I would pick about his attitude in that press conference. And some of his answers were certainly from a position of strength. And that can give clarity not just for us as a fan base, but for everybody in the squad. and running throughout the club, and that if there was any ambiguity there, it's now gone. And that going forward can only be a good thing. But also it's something that the senior management can't allow to happen again. That however they want to restructure everything, or if they want to keep the same structure and position a director of football, there has to be somebody who comes in that fits the bigger picture and that is able to work with and not feel like there was any tension or opposition, because that's certainly something we've picked up on subtly over the last 18 months, really, in and out and from here and there, and not something we've really discussed very much, but certainly something we've been aware of and kept an eye on. And now we've come to this situation. It's been sort of brought to a head by actions of others. The whole situation remains a head scratcher. I still remain adamant there's something weird in that deal that benefits us for him not playing to a certain point, or so many games, or so many minutes. Is it to class him as an academy signing? Because yes, I think there are loopholes by which he could be classed as an academy signing, and therefore helps one massively on FFP. Makes him almost a nil charge to FFP. But is it because there's some weird clauses in the deal about the more he plays, the more we'll pay? The opposite way around, the Broja's loan to Fulham, where the less he plays, the more they pay. Because the minute I saw how that deal was structured, and it was weird for a loan deal, then you suddenly think, well, what's in this deal here? And so we're left with a situation where we're having to play by a certain set of rules to get the maximum FFP benefit out of the signing. We just don't know, and we'll never know. And I think I certainly don't take Eddie's answer at face value. I think he knows quite fine well why things are happening and the way they are. But why should we talk about it? Why should we make it public? There's no reason to. And also, within the deal, there may be confidentiality clauses that we daren't breach. Otherwise, it costs with 20-odd million. So, you know, there's all sorts of things wrapped up in these situations. But what is nice to see is we've got somebody at the helm who clearly is in charge, and we have a lot more clarity on that situation now, and that's got to be beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, definitely has. I mean, it was, as I say, a short press conference.
Steve, you're on mute, mate.
Oh, I'm not.
Can I throw a figure in there? I just catch up on Mitch said there. You said Eddie said he's getting closer. What's really interesting, I just looked up there. As soon as you said it, I just looked up there, and it says on my little chitty here that Lewis Hall played 9 games for Chelsea. He's played 8 for Newcastle. Is he getting close to what he played at Chelsea? Is it something as simple as that? Once he clicks and plays more games than he has for Newcastle, played more games for Newcastle than he has for Chelsea, is that a little one that just flicks the lever over the edge? It could be something as simple as that.
Absolutely. I think this is the thing, is we're often trying to, because we're guessing. Mm-hmm. I think we're in a situation where we can easily over-egg that pudding. And there's probably a very simple answer, because there usually is in most things. Occam Schrader delivers the simplest answer for everything. And there's got to be something in there that we are just not party to, which if we were, everybody would go, oh, right, we understand now.
Yeah. Can you hear us now, guys?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. Lots of people commenting on Ashworth. Ian Edgar says, if Ashworth's been talking to his Man U mates for months, I'm not sure how pleased to see the back of him.
I'm amazed. Sorry, Steve. I'm amazed there's so little in the press, but Ratcliffe's right-hand man, right?
Yeah, brilliant.
Is Ashworth's best mate.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go through more of these comments. Could Man U get around compensation fee if Ashworth just handed his notice in and left? Yes, he'd probably lose out on the money that he could be owed to the remainder of his contract. Somebody else asked a question. Steve Middlemas, do you think Ashworth's got a point that his hands were tied because of FFP and it is not what he expected? I mean, I've not heard him say that, Steve. I'm not sure where you've got that from. I've not heard him say
the Man U media machine has suggested that, Steve.
Yeah, well, I've not heard him say that, but yeah, maybe that could be a situation. I've also heard people saying that ultimately this is going to be a nightmare for Newcastle because he knows all the plans, and you know, Eddie Howe was asked about that today. I think that's garbage. I mean, look, plans are plans. They don't mean that that's what you're going to put into operation. Even knowing what Newcastle couldn't spend is easily found out at the top level of the game. You know, they just need to look at the books at Company's House and just say, right, okay, well, on average, this is what they could spend. I mean, I don't really see the benefit of that. And Lee Ryder was going, well, at least he can't get into your head. And, you know, he goes, well, he said, well, I hope they can't. I mean, it was, again, just weird press conference today. It really was. But yeah, George, I mean, I'm not really particularly bothered about Ashworth going. I think it's much ado about nothing. And for me, you know, hopefully we find somebody who can continue to get the contract sorted. You know, when somebody appears, you know, when somebody of quality appears.
I'm not sorry he's gone. I've got to be sure. I think you lads will remember weeks ago when it first came out that there was a notion he was talking about them. My attitude was goodbye, you know, farewell, and still the same. And the other thing that intrigues me is he was brought from a club where his role was, in my view, because only my view, significantly different to the role we want him to play. The role he was doing at Brighton was buying talented players, young players from all over the place and selling them on at a profit. Well, that may be a little bit of what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do was to buy significant players who can go on the first team now and stay with Newcastle United, not be sold on somewhere else. And that's a different style of working, in my view. And so I'm not sure he's a great loss. No big plans have been leaked in the press from him for as I can see. And if there had been, somebody would have heard something about them. So all this planned stuff is you know, pie in the sky for me as well. I've got no worries about that whatsoever. I think the bottom line for me is somebody at that level who's wanting to go. You get them out the place as quick as you can, as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, it becomes poison. It gets nasty. In any business, never mind football, but particularly in football. And when I hear what this idiot Ratcliffe's saying about it all, how the hell that man made any money, I don't know, because I question he's thinking on lots of things. But you know, hear him talking about what he thinks about how we're treating the thing, and you know, you fancy a man like that being left to sit in his garden for a year and a half. What bloody tripe! Anyway, so no, I'm not unhappy he's gone. I'm still scratching my head to see what he's done for us so far. If you listen to Sky Sports, he's done everything, of course. Listen to Sky Sports, he brought Bruno, he brought this one, he's brought that one. Well, the only one he did bring was bloody Tonali, and he's suspended for 10 months because he didn't do his homework, if you want to be hard about it. So, you know, no, there's nothing about the Dan Ashworth thing which worries me about the future. In fact, I you know, we might well score and get somebody in that much more capable of doing the job we want, not the job that he used to do at Brighton. Yeah. So that's where I am with that, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to remember as well, Steve, that, you know, I mean, Dan Ashworth, you know, people talk about his CV. I mean, he was on the committee, wasn't he, who appointed Sam Allardyce as England manager? How did that work out?
Yeah, he was. I mean, we talked about it last week. I mean, the whole scenario around Brighton was something statistically based. Run by Tony Bloom, the professional gambler. You know, we talked about that last week. The way that Bloom set up what is now Prozone and the whole Opta situation that you have. And he sells the data, he controls the data, he used the data, and then he realized there was a business to that as well. So every club bar 3, I think, pay into into his company for to get all the data on all of these players. It's a really interesting one with Ashworth. It's interesting as well that he obviously wasn't suited in his own frame of mind to what Newcastle are doing, because he's keen to leave. And we talk, Manchester United have got Dave Brailsford there, who George has already mentioned without naming him. And Brailsford is very much into optical gains, the marginal gain that you can make, the 1%, the 0.5%. And that's very much Moneyball, and that's very much exactly what the way that Brighton operated. You know, you make a marginal gain of a small percent on a player, and that marginal gain that you get can be the difference between signing them and not signing them sometimes on the Opta scale. And I think what you've got is you've got probably something. If Man United are going down that American Moneyball style scenario of using stats and more stats to analyze and get something from a footballer, which is obviously also what was done at the FA, then he's probably better suited to Man United than he is to us. It's probably more of his forte. What was interesting from Eddie Howe, however, is how much he rattled, and what he, in the very little bit that he did say, Steve, he talked about the need for a long-term appointment to come into that role. The club needs long-term appointment. That was obviously a dig at Ashworth, who's only been here 18 months, certainly less than 2 years. And that told me that Eddie is making a statement to the club. Whoever you get in next cannot be a mistake. It can't be a Dan Ashworth type of error that you're going to throw in. You can't get someone who is going to, potentially bolt after 2 seasons. So it was Eddie just letting them know, but it was also Eddie saying, look, we talked about Eddie being in charge. It was Eddie's way of also saying to us, I'm telling you what's going on. I'm telling you what needs to happen at this football club. And when we do get onto the lineups, and we've touched very slightly at the very beginning, the Dan Burns situation, it's Eddie saying to us, by the way, guys, that's my decision. It's not the press's decision, whether it's Manchester United, London, or whomever press, local press, national press, who fanzines and whomever want to have a pop at Dan Burn. It's my decision whether Dan Burn plays at left back or centre back. It's my decision whether Dan Burn is on the touchline, sitting alongside me, or whether he's out on the field. So I'm in charge. At the moment, I'm in charge of everything, and that's the way that we're going to have to put up with it. And I think those little subtle messages, when he's sitting there smiling and giving the short word answers, that's just part of the onward trajectory of Eddie, and where he thinks the club should be going with him at the helm.
Yeah, interesting. Lots of interesting comments coming in. When Man United stumble for Ashworth, it'll be undisclosed. People asking whether Les Ferdinand's qualified to do the job. I don't think a sentimentality would be great, yeah, but not on a professional level. I know he's done a job at QPR, but I'm not so sure that's an avenue these owners would go down. I wonder how Jim Ratcliffe would behave if a rival company to Ineos wanted to employ a key member of personnel that had 20 months gardening leave. That's a good one, Mitch.
It's a very good one, and if you listen to that entire interview, and I'm probably going to go off on one here, you tell me that man, the head of a worldwide petrochemical company, hasn't had employees leave to rivals, and he's made sure they've gone on garden leave for a period.
Well, if you can get a look at some of the America's Cup stuff. Huh? Look what he did. He did to some of the lads that went to Australia.
When he comes out and says it's a little bit silly, he knows he's talking out of his arse. The best analogy of the Ashworth situation, I saw somebody comparing it to walking into an Aston Martin dealer and saying, how much is that car? And being told it's £180,000 and saying, well, I'm not going to pay that. And the dealer goes, well, you can't have it. And then him kicking off saying, but it needs to be a car. It needs to be driven. It needs to be on the road. And I would like to drive it. Well, pay the money, son. That's how it works. That's how the world works. And you know, in the business you're in, that's how it works. Don't tell me you've not had employees disappear off onto gardening leave and you make their life difficult. You're absolutely right, Dad. The America's Cup thing's one thing I'm going to touch on here as well. Also wrapped him up in that interview that you've had everybody fawning over, from TalkSport to The Athletic to Dan Rowan at the BBC, talking about how he's strong words and he's got great opinions and it'll buoy the Man United fans. Great opinions. His comments on Mason Greenwood. I want to deal with the facts and not the hype. How does anybody who's left a domestic abuse situation feel hearing the man who's just bought into one of the biggest clubs in the world says about a player who was accused of just that, and his accuser backed down quite simply because of the pressure applied to her within the relationship that they have, like so many domestic abuse cases go. And I think that's outrageous for him to make a comment like that. Imagine if Yasser Al-Rumayyan had made a comment like that, what the reaction in the press would be. It's absolute disgrace. And then he's icing on the cake. As a man who moved his company to Switzerland and doesn't pay tax in the UK,
Exactly.
to ask the taxpayers to fund a rebuild of Old Trafford when he's worth £47 billion himself. Jog on, son. Jog on. And his little Man United acolytes around him saying this is the dawn of a new age. He only bought 25% of the club off the Glazers. They're still there. So if you support his success, you're giving 3/4 of that success straight to the Glazers. So you can hashtag Glazers out as much as you like on every tweet you send. You're a hypocrite. Absolute hypocrite. But what gets me is you then have other things within YOS. There's scandal within the America's Cup. They've been accused of greenwashing on a number of their projects, particularly their backing of the New Zealand All Blacks, which is quite a controversial thing. And still a lot of people in New Zealand are very unhappy about that. I would quite like to see a little flotilla of green ships up and down the Manchester Ship Canal, reminding them of that. And Adam Crafton's not calling for that. He's saying he was impressed by Ratcliffe's words. Bollocks with you. This is the Man U media manipulating things because they need help. And they need help because this isn't a buyout, it's a buy-in. The Glazers are still there. And it would appear that the so-called rich billionaire who's buying in doesn't actually have the money to do anything much. And it's not really going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
You know, and Brailsworth, the man who was behind the cycling team that Ineos had, the one who found out by email only after the event that the doctor was giving performance-enhancing drugs to cyclists. Yeah, right. That would be the same sporting director who found out their manager at Lyon was making Islamophobic and racist slurs about black players and players of Islamic faith before he left for PSG, and then got the bullet there and was fined for his outrageous comments. He always seems to find out just after they've gone by email, and I was shocked to find that out myself. Were you? You were shocked to find that out yourself, were you? Well, there you go. So either you don't have a clue what's going on, or, and this is Ashworth's best mate, allegedly,
Yeah.
you know, or you're absolutely complicit in every devious move that Ineos has made in everything that they've backed sporting-wise. and therefore, you know, this is the level of people that they're going to join, and that Ashworth wants to join. Jog on, son.
Birds of a feather.
Our club. And you imagine, had anybody associated with Newcastle United made any of those comments, taking taxpayers' money, making light of domestic abuse, you know, all of those things that he did about taking somebody from another club and that garden leads are nonsense and why can't I have it now because it's me and it's Man United and we're mint. Well, I'm sorry, that's not how the world works, and you know it. What people aren't aware of, and again, it comes back to what petrochemical people are saying to us in this part of the world, and Stu will tell you as well, we've been doing some digging. They're saying he doesn't have the money that he pretends to do. And that buying into Man United's burned pretty much all the spare cash they had.
Yeah.
That's why he's floating the taxpayers pay for Man United Stadium, because he ain't going to pay for it. And I hate to disappoint Man United to tell them that I'd be right again. But it's one thing I find absolutely amazing and fantastically ironic. A lot of these things about the green washing and about the America's Cup and about the All Blacks were actually raised in the press by Sheikh Jassim's PR team. And it was dodged, brushed under the carpet, and people like Dan Rowan didn't mention it at all. And now they barely mention it in passing because they know they've got to, because it's out there, and it doesn't take a clever person with a phone and Google to find these things out. It comes up very easily if you want to go through them. And there's more besides. I could go on for another hour and a half, probably. One thing for sure, they're not as clean and as white as everybody would like to make it. And secondly, it comes back to this potential argument, the perennial argument almost, that it would appear that white man with money, everything's happy. Arabian or brown person with money, oh, there's something dodgy going on there. And that's not how the world works either. And that setting themselves up for a glorious fall when the wheels come off on this. They don't have as much flex on FFP as they think. The buy-in hasn't given them a massive amount of leeway, not much more than they already had. And let's remember, it's a buy-in, not a buy-out. When your Man U fans are tweeting away with hashtag Glazers out, any success they have that is fronted by Ratcliffe gives 3/4 of that credit, financially at least, to the Glazers. So are you happy now?
Well, and add to the fact, Neil, that if you spread what Ratcliffe's done, all the things he's doing, his 40-odd billion doesn't go very far.
No.
And I see that from the America's Cup side, because, as you know, my ex-mate, my poor old mate Peter, was very involved in the America's Cup thing. And some of the things he found out made his hair stand on end. For example, Ben Ainsley's got a fantastic contract, but dare he even think of going somewhere else, he'd be nailed to the floor. So him saying things about Ashworth are just hypocritical completely. And his comments about it being silly. What is, that's him, it's silly, not Newcastle United. I mean, and getting the taxpayers to fund a new Wembley or fund a new toilet in Manchester. Yeah, great. He's one of the biggest tax dodgers in the country, and he's how many wives has he had? And he dares to talk about abuse. No. No, you're right, Neil. He's not what they think he is, and I think they might get a shock.
No.
And if it goes wrong, I think he could get a shock as well.
And the media is swung into action to deliver a narrative, an absolute narrative that we were never afforded the grace of. And yes, it's very difficult for us with Saudi ownership to criticise certain things without recognising who our owners are. However, I think as a fan base, we've become very understanding of recognising who our owners are and where they come from, and when we're not necessarily on the safest of foundations to cast stones. But when I see someone delivering an interview that if somebody from our club came out and delivered, they would be hung out to dry by every media outlet possible. They would stick the knife in wherever possible and say, look what this person's saying. And this isn't right. And these are people involved with the sporting club. Well, if that's what Man United want, crack on and good luck to you. Will not be sorry when the wheels come off.
No, definitely won't be. Great stuff. Don't forget, we've got plenty on a Friday to keep you occupied. So I will start with the lookalikes this week. We usually leave them until later in the show, but we've got a few to get through. So here you go. thanks again to everybody who sent these in. I will start off with these, which have started to wing their way into my inbox. Julia Robertson, Anne Hathaway, very good, really good. Hugh Jackman and Clint Eastwood. I wasn't as convinced with that one. I can see where you're going. I'm not sure whether it's the eyes, which maybe but Gene Kelly and Jean Dujardin. Yeah, very good that as well. So thank you for that. One more of those, I think, to go next week. I had this one as well from David. Tune lookalike, Alan Shearer with a tash in an old Newcastle United picture. I think we've seen that one before, but yeah, it does look like Alan, that one.
It would be fabulous to get someone from the BBC makeup department to get hold of them for half an hour.
just to do it. Just get Harry Enfield on the case. Chumley Warner. Kid Creole and Morgan Gibbs White. Very good, Tom. I like that one. Very good. Kid Creole is a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rita. Bo Bridges and Todd Bowley.
It's in the American slick hairstyle.
It is. Another one from Rita. Robson Green and Nicholas Dominguez. I can see where you came from with that one, Rita, but I think you were starting to get excited about what was ahead. The next one, Nico Williams and Brad Pitt. Nico Williams is, you've done him a massive favour with that one. But the one that you got right and the one you were getting excited about, Rita, of course, was this. Spit. Yeah. Hold on, let's have a look. Yes, you've got the hair and everything there, and the eyes and the smile. Well done, Rita. And Roger, just for old time's sake, he says, don't be hasty with your answers, though. Who do you think this is? Yes, it is Steve.
Cheers, Roger.
Thank you for that, Roger. This was very good. Stan Laurel and the Pope.
Hey,
That's excellent. That is excellent. This one, Napoleon Dynamite and Joe White. God, he's only set foot on the pitch for his first game, and he's already getting a look.
That's overnight fame. That
it's not one to be happy with, I don't think either. Jason Tyndall and Peter Barlow. I've thought this, Sooty. That is good as well. It's not a winner this week. It's not a winner. Brad Friedel and Bruce Willis from Tom.
Yeah, I see where he's coming from there.
Yeah, it is good as well. He gave us this one as well. Joe Linton and Rhys James.
Or possibly his sister.
Yeah, it's there. There could be cousins. Nathan Aki and Rude Hullet, which is more down to the hairstyle, I think, Tom. But I see where you were coming from with that. And Braze Mendes and Bruno Fernandes. Yeah, very similar.
That's good.
This one we didn't want to chuck in last week because he announced his retirement after taking ill, but it never gets old. Roy Hodgson already enjoying his retirement. Yeah. Along with a guy from KFC, by the looks of it, just before he grew his longer beard. And Alan McKenzie, thank you for this one. The Secretary of State for Health and Bob Geldof.
Yes.
Seen that one a couple of times. A strange coincidence. He has an eerie resemblance of the 3,000-year-old statue bears to Michael Jackson.
Wow. Statues
and people. We seem to be getting a few of them now. And David Cook, thanks for this one. Little Arms has a lookalike. I'm not sure where he got where Neil Watty is from and what he does, but slightly older version of the England number one. Sandro from Mafidesi Pet and Andoni Irola.
That's good. That
excellent. Couple of pictures there just to back up what you were saying, but yeah, that is good. Ray Parler. I'm not sure Ray would be too happy with that comparison either. Number 3. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, yes.
Seth from the Woolpack and a dog that looks like Seth from the Woolpack. And the top 2, well, it had to be these two, didn't it, this week, lads? In no particular order. Thanks to Sooty. And that's better. Thanks to Moxie Mag. Brilliant. Gollum and Dan Ashworth. Excellent stuff. That's your winners this week. Thanks very much. If you've got one, send it to our Facebook page or our Facebook group. Just tag us in it. We'll pick them up off there or send them to me, Mitch, or George, or Steve on X, and we will save them into the show next week. Big shout out to Kev Chilvers as well. He's in the chat. He's him and his family haven't had the greatest of weeks. He's okay, but one of his family members is going through a bad time, and he has messaged to say, "Afternoon all. Thank you for your kind words to me over the past couple of days, Kev. We are your extended family, mate, around the world, and I'm sure the nufc matters chat will have plenty of love for you."
Thanks for the big pictures, Kev. The sunset pictures from Georgia were brilliant.
Donald, good morning. Good morning. I usually say to Donald because I speak to him in the morning. I speak to him in the evening because he does the Northeast Footy Bracket show as well. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he says, reminds me of the villain from the French Connection. Yeah, there's a lookalike, Donald. Get it sent in. And Sutty, whilst we're talking about the Dan Ashworth situation, says, has the panel heard of any whispers who we might be interested in taking on as director of football, and who would they like to see? Well, Mitch, I'll come to you. You're the man who gets the whispers abroad. Any advance on the names that we've heard already?
The one thing that certainly Steve and I bounced around over the last week was looking back at who we know had been at the club in the whole process of making appointments when they were looking at the setup they wanted to give. And we know Michael Emiliano, formerly at Chelsea, had been at the club. He'd been at the club twice.
No, the paper said they hadn't.
And discussed, the papers can say what the hell they're like. We know he'd been at the club twice. Staple me to a bloody wall by me bollocks, and I'll still tell you he's been at the club twice. And then all of a sudden he was sort of parked in this role as sort of the director of the Saudi Pro League once PIF had bought for the clubs, etc., etc. And I use that word very deliberately. It felt like he'd just been parked there. It didn't seem really to be the kind of thing that he would be using his skills to the maximum. And I don't wonder whether that's a conversation that's being revisited at the moment. My only concern about that would be, does that then lead to a bigger root and branch overhaul in the summer? You would hope not, but I genuinely think we're reaching an interesting point. Certain members of the ownership group have been very conspicuous by their silence, and we know that there's been a further dilution of the share percentages. But also that is a hindrance to PIF, because when they want to inject money into the club, everybody has to do it proportionally, and there is certainly one part of the ownership group that financially cannot do that. And that's not a criticism, by the way.
Yeah,
it just is what it is. And does that then bring further change? Don't know. But that's the one name I keep coming back to whenever I look at where things are at. And when names are bandied around, I don't think the appointment will be a small name. I genuinely don't. But what comes with that, you have to wonder. But it doesn't deter my opinion that they want to do the very best for the club. And that no matter what else happens, here we are again with PIF being linked to buy-in at Roma now. Well, it was AC Milan, then it was Inter Milan, and then it was AC again, and then it was Inter again, and now it's Roma. But very much like the investment in the 4 Saudi clubs, any football-related investment in Roma is a separate project to Newcastle United. The money that goes into there won't affect the money that comes into us, because PIF have got an absolute fuck ton of money. And then therefore the projects don't hinder each other. They're both football related projects, in the same way the Saudi League project is a football related project, but the budget doesn't affect our budget, and vice versa. That would be a nonsense. That's like saying all of the PIF's petrochemical investments affect what Aramco does. Does it hell? And it won't. And so, people don't have to get overhyped about that. But I genuinely think for the Premier product, it's us. We're in the Premier League, which is the world's premier football product. And they want big and notable and premier names associated with us. And I think they'll get that by hook or by crook. And I think their appointment as the director of football may be one of those where they've got an opportunity to put a name in.
Okay, interesting. Any names that you're thinking of, Steve? You know, you've heard what Mitch has had to say. Anything you've heard?
I've heard lots. I've heard lots from Spenny. He started off about 3 dozen names this week, hasn't he, on Twitter? Thank goodness he's still there, keeping us informed. Where would we be without Spenny? And the rest of the lads, by the way. I mean, the number of names that we've had fired at us. You know, but you look at the Premier League and you go, right, well, is it going to be somebody from another Premier League club? Are we going to do exactly the same as has happened with us and Man United? Are we going to go for the lad from Brentford, or are we going to go back to Brighton? Are we going to look further afield? I mean, there's lots of names being bandied around, a lot of ideas, I think, from the press rather than anything else. Michael Emenalo, as Mitch rightly stated, was certainly in the frame until right towards the end. He was there at the same time, you know, being talked about at the same time as Eddie was being interviewed and this type of thing. I think the club eventually went for a Brit. They went for an English name. They went for the Premier League experience, although Michael Emenalo, don't forget, had been at Chelsea from 2007 through to I think it was 2017. So he had plenty Premier League experience. What did he do when he was there? Well, he was head coach, or he was a coach alongside Avram Grant, I believe. And the sort of players he then got promoted into a director of football or a technical director's role. And the sort of people that he brought into the club, Juan Mata, Courtois, De Bruyne, Salah, Kante, Hazard, Fabregas. They were the sort of players that he had the clout to go out and convince. Not that it took much convincing at the time, but working under Abramovich with the money that he had available, he was able to convince those players that there was a potential opportunity for them at Chelsea. So that shows you that the echelons that he worked in, you know, the avenues that he worked in. I don't think Dan Ashworth worked in a similar framework, to be perfectly honest. If you look at the players that he signed, they were very much, as I've said earlier, players that were selected for value rather than players that were selected for quality. Although you could say that De Bruyne and Salah weren't really successful at Chelsea, but that was very much the setup that Chelsea had. But he also set up their academy, or farm, as some people described it as, because it became a bit of a player farm. Players out all over Europe. Christ, that would, if he came here and produced something like that and had players scattered all over Europe, dear me, can you imagine the air miles that Shola would have? It would be unbelievable, wouldn't it? But he also worked and set up the women's academy, and then the women's team itself, and look how successful they've been. You know, so he was there at the very beginning to really embed the ladies' team into Chelsea as a force, if you like. So you can't deny that the man had the background and the CV. And I wouldn't be surprised if they looked elsewhere. The very fact that he's at Saudi now, they obviously trust him. And you just look at what's gone on over the last sort of 12 months with the investments that they have made over there. So if you want a steady hand at the tiller, if you want somebody that you can trust, someone that you know has the CV that you're looking for, because obviously PIF felt very highly of him to actually go out, perhaps because of what they had witnessed at his interview with Newcastle. Perhaps he just didn't fit Newcastle at the time, and perhaps Newcastle didn't fit him. There was a slight discussion over the family and the education that the kids were having, and it just didn't seem the right time for him to come around. That was the little sort of throwaway remark that we heard at that particular junction. But we've moved on 2 years now. Family be older, more settled, and it could be that he's the sort of guy that could step in. I'm not saying he will, because I think that what Newcastle now are going to do is going to take their time. Listening to what Eddie said, it's pretty obvious they're going to take their time. There's no need to dive in and rush about things. They've got their plans that they've already got going forward, and judging by the smile on Eddie's face, he's in charge, as I said earlier. So until things change, the only thing I would say to Eddie is, be careful what you wish for, as I said last week, because sometimes when sporting directors come in, they have a different philosophy to the philosophy of the way that a football club should operate. Usually it's a framework that's agreed by all sides, but usually the sporting director is the person that brings the manager in rather than vice versa. So whether Newcastle are doing things also over tit again, I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see, Steve. But it's tell you what, it's going to be an interesting sort of tail end of the season on the pitch, and then off the pitch all the way through the close season, and then into next season. Whether it's signings to do with players, or whether it's to do with the back room, or whether it's changes in the boardroom, new people coming in. This is going to be what it's going to be like for Newcastle United for the foreseeable, and we're just going to have to get used to it. We're sitting there, and we could whinge on that everything was settled, and now it isn't. I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I think that, like all organisations, there are always things milling around in the background. There's always unhappiness from one quarter or another. There's always disagreements. If a company didn't run with disagreements scattered all over it, then it's not a real company. Newcastle United is a real company, and it has all of the natural bust-ups that occur in behind the scenes. The discussions, it's how you get out of them, it's how you resolve them, and it's how you move forward with them. And that's the most important thing now for the board. Make the right decisions, for Newcastle United. And one thing I would say as well is, within the confines of Newcastle United, it's about time they started making decisions that affect the day-to-day running of the club from a fan's perspective. And I think that's something that we really need to start addressing, because, quite frankly, worrying about who's a sporting director and who's going to be on the board of directors and such like is one thing, but what's really bugging fans at the minute are some of the things that have been driving the social media for what has been 6 months now. And it's the issues of ticketing, it's the issue of balloting, it's the issues of now finding that we're one of only 2 clubs that is operating a system whereby you've got to go and risk buying a ticket and then find you've got to walk around to the other side of an away ground through all the away fans to pick up a ticket. Now, I know it's not 1984, and we're not getting pelted with bricks as we walk around Main Road like it used to be, but that's not the point,
No. 1984 was an interesting year to pick.
It was, wasn't it? That's what I picked that on purpose.
Can I ask you a hypothetical question, Steve?
Yep.
If this was Lee Charnley and Mike Ashley in charge of the football club now, how do you think the fans would be reacting?
Well, we all know the decisions that he made. Chronicle for a start, we know that. There would be the social media would have exploded. The fanzines and the podcasters, it would be all they would be talking about, and there would probably be effigies being burnt behind the Gallagher end of both Charnley and Ashley. Again, would be shouting at shops, would be doing all of the necessaries that occurred for 14 years. That's the way I think it would have occurred if they'd brought this in. If they'd brought in this ticketing system and they'd done it without any dialogue. And some people out there might say there's been dialogue, but the dialogue's all been an after the event dialogue, unless there were secret talks taking place between various groups, as was rumoured. But They've made an absolute pig's ear of it, and they can't seem to get themselves out of it because they've got people in there, and I've said it for so long now, that the people behind the scenes, and we said take over to Mira and Amanda, you've got some good people in there, but you've got the Mike Ashley crowd, the mentality, not necessarily the individuals, but the mentality, which is let them eat cake, couldn't give them monkeys. And I think there are still people within that power positions, and people who have come in subsequently with an agenda are now doing Newcastle fans no favours whatsoever under what they call services.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to go back to the away ticket thing, I still insist, and Newcastle United can contradict this if they want, doing what they're doing with away fans, putting mock tickets in, is called entrapment. And entrapment was made illegal in this country in the 1970s. It's still illegal as far as I know, and somebody should challenge it. Like what they call a ballot isn't a bloody ballot. It's not legal what they do. And if they want to call it the ballot, it's got to be made legal. It's time somebody challenged these notions, because these are just pie in the sky things out of somebody in the office. You remember the receptions they had where people were being turned away because they weren't 18 and all that sort of rubbish. And all it needed was a bit of paper, somebody at the door, so that the father or the relative they're with said, yes, this person is 18. That's all it would have needed. But now they had to go through the mockery of sending kids home and sending parents home because they weren't 18. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. That's all bad thinking.
Yeah. Can I just say, George, that you talk about the challenge. You know what? I challenged the Fan Advisory Board, which is due to be meeting very, very soon. I challenge those members of the Fan Advisory Board to start listening to fan groups, start listening to the fans, start listening to the people who've been affected by this, and start a fight on their behalf and get the right answers, ask the right questions, and get the right answers. Don't be fobbed off, because this is your opportunity as a Fans Advisory Board to start doing what the role is going to be there for. They're for the fans, giving advice to the club, gaining advice, but sorting it out. This is at board level now. This is your opportunity. You're not talking to supporter services. You're not talking to the diversity officer. You're not talking to the lad in the ticket office who is sick to death of hearing about it and hasn't had the opportunity to do anything about it. You're now talking to people right at the very top of the football club. So get it into them. Get it into their head that the way that you've been treating the fans is absolutely abysmal, and do something about it. Show that you've got the guts to do that, and then you might get the credit that you'll deserve.
And you know what, Steve? That's not going to be the focus of that board.
No.
It's not.
No, it's well, what do you get out of a hand-picked set of, well, I nearly said something rude there. Well, we've got a hand-picked set of people who do they represent me? To the hell. I don't. I've got no idea what they're interested in Newcastle United is. In fact, there's at least one of them. I'm not even sure that they're a fan. They're going to be called a fan, never mind anything else. So they're going to represent my point of view? Not a chance. Not a chance. There are many other good fans around our club in our city who could do a fantastic job as far as I'm concerned. At the moment, all I see is a group of puppets. They're there because they wanted there, not because they were voted there or sponsored there, or they're there because they were handpicked. And that's never a good way to start something like that. Never.
nufc Matters, the three amigos on a Friday night, the straight talking critical friend will be back after the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Go to their website, skipsandbins.com, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. Go to their website, unitedgrouptravel.com, email info@unitedgrouptravel.com, or phone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. They're a local company from Morpeth, and there are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under the video. Click the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your social media. If you want to help the channel financially, you can pay a one-off £25 fee. You get a cup, a scarf, a pen and a membership card and entry into the NUFC Matters monthly draw. Email john@nufcmatters.com for more details, or if you've got a smartphone, scan the QR code now and it takes you straight to the membership pack. We also support the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you'll find the matchday bucket. You can make a donation virtually today. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. We also do events during the year. NUFC Matters Live will be at the O2 City Hall on Friday the 2nd of August for an evening with Rob Lee, one night in Antwerp. Tickets start at £15 and you can get them from ticketmaster.co.uk. An evening with the entertainers takes place on Friday the 24th of January 2025 at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House in Newcastle. Telephone 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk to buy tickets today. You can also catch me on the North East Footy Breakfast Show live on Toon Radio weekdays 7 till 9 a.m. on DAB, smart speakers and the toonuk.com. And a couple of other things. The NUFC Matters Live end of season party, 20th of July, 5 o'clock till late at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are on sale now from newcastlelegends.com or nufcmatters.com. Tickets are a tenner. Supermat and Gibbo will be live. Ask George will be live, and we'll have live music from Stannington as well as a couple of other guests. So get yourself along. It's a tenner a ticket, well worth a tenner. And we will be donating our profit from that evening to Dementia Matters. So that is the chosen charity for that particular event. And I've also stuck a link in the chat, which I will do again. Get yourself onto that link. It is the NUFC Matters auction. It's the latest one we've got. 16 Newcastle related signed bits of memorabilia are up for grabs on there. Get yourself on. It runs for a week. Get yourself onto that little link there and you can grab yourself a bargain. And a big shout out to Nikki and David, who I bumped into at the Quayside on Sunday. Great to see you. Yeah, thanks for supporting the show. Means a lot when people do stop us in the street and say hi and introduce themselves. But great to see both of you. Hope you had a good morning. And I hope Nikki didn't spend too much of your money, David. Okay, plenty to get through tonight, as always, on the show. And because we're all in the mood for talking, let's get Tweet of the Week out of the way and we'll be back. Quite a few hours sent, which I'm bearing in mind we've got a new policy I couldn't use, but some made it through. Bournemouth Football Club didn't quite think about the lineup on the photograph from behind. There is number 4 Cox and number 11 Wellard. Lining up alongside the officials.
From behind,
from behind. Very good, yes. Barham, I took these with my iPhone X camera. Quality so surreal. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio painted them. Was quickly replied, not to be confused with award-winning actor Leonardo da Vinci. It's awful when you make a mistake in a tweet, isn't it? People pick up on it. Toy Story 5. Hi, I'm Andy's new toy. Coming soon to a cinema house near you. And here's a photo of McDonald's staff member collecting apple pie filling in the 1980s.
Not far wrong. You bugger the hot.
Ian, thanks for this, mate. He says there's a virus going around making people forget the names of 80s rock bands. Nobody knows the cure.
Oh.
Can have been a bit of viz. According to Wikipedia, dogs can discriminate odours at concentrations nearly 100 million times lower than humans can. But if this is true, how come I can retch when picking up my dog's turds in a scented bag at arm's length, and yet he can stick his nose in a big pile of steaming crap and not bat an eyelid? Load of old nonsense, if you ask me. Like that. And it's just a jump to the left. And then a step to the right. Put your hands on your hips. You bring your knees in tight. But it's the pelvic thrust that really drives you insane. Let's do the time warp again. Excellent. There you are, Julie. There's a bit of singing for you. Soda Pop Kid, thanks for this. He says, when I was a kid, you didn't have to say don't try this at home because we weren't complete morons back then. And a new film is out. It's called The Constant Gardener, starring Dan Ashworth. Thanks, Mark. And tweet of the week from Jimmy. I bet Rick Astley really struggles with Lent.
Very good, Jimmy.
Never going to give you up. Very good. For those of you who didn't get the joke. Daniel Walton, don't play with super glue. Great advice from Dr. Spock. And good news, spring, lads, is just around the corner.
Oh, dear me.
You know, I do like my science fiction ones, though, lads. Double bubble this week. What about that for a toilet?
Exactly.
Dear
Just
me.
the Domestos next to it, they kill all no germs dead as well. Exterminate them. And this one, what do you get when you cross a black bear and a mountain lion? Killed. You get killed. Excellent. And I suspect his dad was a mechanic. 10 mil socket. And acoustic, what a Scottish farmer uses to control his cattle. That's one for Stu Penman. Acoustic. And Man United Wags from the last league title win reunite. Great to see this. Only cans. Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Another Star Wars as well. And Star Wars content, says Ugly Camel. Stop doing this to your pictures. And humans are the only creatures on Earth that will cut down a tree, turn it into paper, then write, save the trees on it. And what would it have been like for Jimmy Hill, says John, in VR? He'd have been knackered. Good point, John. One from Jimmy. A clean one from Jimmy. What the hell, Chris, says Jimmy. Adopt a highway. Chris bangs family and friends. And oh yes, thanks for this, Neil. Zamo, by the way, because we were talking about this the other week on a lookalike. Zamo from Grange Hill. He actually runs that shop, and if you look in the top left, he's got a picture of himself on cans. Brilliant. Thanks for that. And I like this one. The registration plate, off to pub.
Brilliant.
And last couple. Sunderland football players have recently visited a local orphanage. To see their sad faces all miserable with absolutely no hope of a chance or happy or successful future was just heartbreaking, said little Tommy, age 7, from Pennywell. Never grow old then. And another tweet from Ugly Camel. Specs and drugs and sausage rolls. Excellent, that, mate. Top 2 then. 1 bottle lasts longer than 3. Sunderland managers. And oh no, I've got another one as well. On this day in 1987, U2 released the Joshua Tree.
That's class.
And the winner, elderly pickpocket in road. I often wondered what that meant. Thanks for your tweets. Keep them coming. We will feature the clean ones next week on the show. But as usual, go to our Facebook page, or Facebook group, like or join them, and you can stick them on there, or you can send them to the guys on X. Big shout out to Paul Tweedy. He did ask us a question for Geordie's here, Geordie's there, but it was a pre-record on Wednesday. So I will ask your question tonight, Paul. He said, here's my question. Is Howe still loyal regarding certain players, Burn instead of Tino, for example? And will it be his downfall regarding his own position going forward? Great question. What's your thoughts on that, George?
Oh, difficult one. Stuck for words is the honest answer. Say it again, Steve.
Will being let me go back to the question because I took it off screen. Here's my question. Is Howe still loyal regarding certain players? Burn instead of Tino, for example. Will it be his downfall regarding his own position going forward?
My instant reaction was to think, I don't know, I wasn't sure what the question was about because it was so long. The answer is he's in danger. Because you see, as I said, the reaction Burn on Saturday when Burn made that mistake for that goal, and Steve sitting down there, we looked at each other and said goal before the Bournemouth player got the bloody ball. We knew where it was going to end up, and if the staff at the side couldn't see that, well, they're not very professional. And if he is that loyal, yes, it could cost him his job because if we're the ones seeing that, there's some very powerful people in Saudi Arabia. You're not going to tell me they're not going to be talking to football people and saying, what did you think of that? Why are people upset about this? Why are people upset about that? And yes, he's got to be very, very careful. I like the guys turned me because when he first came, I wasn't sure he was the right choice. But the things he's done, the players he's improved alone massively have turned me to his opinion. But I think the question's framed right. It could be his downfall. I got stuck because I thought it was a long question, and it is a long question, but it's a good one because everything he does is so professional, but that one could be his Achilles heel. If he's too loyal, somebody else somewhere will be saying, well, that's not right. That shouldn't have happened. As I said, just like Steve and I looked at each other, we didn't even wait for the ball to reach the Bournemouth player. We just looked at each other and said, he hesitated, gone. He was gone. It doesn't matter how many people cover him after that. I mean, I've been protecting him because I was saying he wasn't getting covered. Well, you could have a dozen people covering him on that one. The problem was he hesitated, a schoolboy error. And Eddie made it worse by taking him off almost immediately afterwards. And he the cries of Tino were going round the ground before he got to the bloody touchline. And you can see he wasn't pleased about that. So yes, it could be his Achilles heel, Steve.
Okay, Steve, same question to you, mate.
Yeah, it could be, but I think every manager gets accused at various points in time, either being too loyal or too prone to tinkering. You just go back to Chelsea and then to Leicester and the Tinkerman, and the amount of stick he would get because he was constantly changing the lineup. You look, it happens. Some managers are always looking ahead 2 and 3 games, and they're not looking at the individual game or individual performances. They tend to look at the opposition, and they get caught in that. And then so they make changes based on the teams they're playing, on the opposition players. Eddie's totally different. Eddie has a style. He has a lineup that he likes, which is 4-3-3. He very rarely, if ever, has changed that lineup. He's loyal to the players he's got, but he's also been, over the last 3 months, in a situation where, other than, I would say, that one change that we're talking about, which is Livramento for Burn, he hasn't had any other options whatsoever. Yeah. So in terms of loyalty, it's because of the situation that he's kept the same players in. He's only had the 3 midfielders, and I think also perhaps he gets caught up in that. In when you're listening to your coaches, you're thinking, right, well, if I take Dan Burn out and I put Livramento in, does that what options does that give me going forward? Great. What about defensively? Yes, but what options does it give me if I want to make a change later on? And sometimes some managers are prone not be keen on making lots of changes. We've seen Eddie do it recently, where there's 3 and 4 substitutions. And the criticism of any criticism over Eddie Howe right in the early days was how he made those substitutions and when he made them. Often made them at the wrong time, made them too late, made them ineffective. When he did make substitutions that were effective, we got the benefit of it. But there's so many cogs spinning constantly with Newcastle United, with the squad. He's got Livramento sitting on the bench, and I think Livramento's covering 2 positions as well sometimes. He's covering that midfield. He's covering all the way down the left side. He's also got some options on the right side for him. And Eddie's looking and got it. Well, so I know Sons has been carrying injury on the right-hand side, so I might need him to come in on there. But if I've already slotted him in on the left and I've taken Dan Burn off, but then, Sons carrying injury, I would rather keep Burn on because, for example, if Botman goes down, I need to bring Burn in to slot alongside Shaw because he's the left-sided player. Then I can bring Livramento. All of these things are spinning around in his head. It's the same. We've had Trippier, who was carrying an injury for a period of time and then went through a bit of a bad patch. And you've got Livramento, who's the option, especially when Trippier was carrying injury, that could come in on the right-hand side. So the lad was on the bench. And then we've had the situation with Gordon not being as effective because he was carrying an injury. We've had Almiron out for various periods of time. So I think it's a combination. I don't think it's necessarily him looking at Burn and saying, I'm putting him in and I'm leaving him in, because I think it's with Eddie as a coach, and one would hope that I'm getting it right, that it's the bigger picture he's looking at. But from a fan's point of view, we see a player that's struggling and we see a player that we think could do better, and we immediately jump on it and we go for it. But we're not aware of the dynamics that have decided that he's going to play Dan Burn as the left full back, and to be held. And some people would look at it as being stubborn, and he's digging his feet in.
Yeah.
And sometimes a manager has to do that at various times. But if anything, that can be his downfall when it's happening time and time and time and time and time again, and he hasn't got an excuse for it. But you've also got to think of the impact it has on the player. And as George said, when Dan Burn was hauled off on Saturday, I mean, the lad was devastated. He didn't want to come off it. The speed in which it happened, it wasn't as though that the change was going to happen anyway. It was, there's a mistake, not gone right, and I'm making the change, and that was it. And Dan was devastated because, as a Geordie, he's probably felt as though he's let the team down, he's let himself down, he's let the manager down. And let's face it, as a professional footballer, the last thing you want to be is to hold off in that particular situation. So I did feel for him, but we've got such a limited squad at the moment, Steve, that I think that Eddie just has to be very, very careful of making the rash decision at times. He'll get it right. He'll get it right. He knows what he wants, and he knows where we're heading going forward. And it's a bit like as we said earlier, with the whole situation, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, so we can't really, other than speculate, we don't really know enough. And if Howe's setting his team up to play in a certain way, and he's got certain players, and personally, I think Botman's been carrying something for a while. I don't think he's been effective. I don't think he's been as quick. And because of that, what I noticed over the last 4 or 5 games at least was that when Dan Burn was playing, he was tucking in further towards the inside rather than wide. That was creating the gaping hole, and that was the hole that you was expecting to get the cover from whoever was on the right side of midfield. But because we had, For example, Longstaff playing there at times and a little bit deeper. We had Miley playing there, but playing a little bit deeper. And we had Almiron in and out, sometimes playing, sometimes not. It became very difficult for Dan Burn to get the consistent cover that he needed. So I think there's a whole combination of things, Stephen. But you know what? We just have to wait and see. And yes, he might get roasted tomorrow. He might kick the lad into the stands. Who knows? You just don't know. Dan Burn has it in him to be able to play a very, very good controlled game tomorrow. If he's got the supporting mechanism around him, and he's a sound lad as well. So you know, I don't worry too much. I just rely on Eddie making the choices, and then the rest of the team blending in with it.
Thanks, Jules, for saying that. Over 500 watching again. Amazing. Thank you for your support week in, week out. Please check you've clicked the thumb up, subscribe, and share. All are free. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Never taken for granted. So thank you very much for that. And thanks to the new faces in the chat as well. Seen a few. Saka's older brother is in there. Nice message from Sean as well earlier. So welcome. And don't make it a passing phase. Make sure you join us 7 days a week for your nufc matters fix at 6 o'clock on a night time. Just your thoughts on Paul Tweedy's question, Mitch. You know, is it potentially going to be his downfall? I've seen lots of comparisons of Eddie Howe's time at Bournemouth. Bournemouth fans saying that, oh, you're going the same way as we did. You're conceding lots of goals, and you know, could end up like Bournemouth.
Couple of things I could make on that. One, doesn't any manager ultimately stand and fall on the decisions he makes on the pitch? Yeah. Whether there's loyalty involved in that or not, that's how it works. And so yes, he will. If you want to perceive that as being loyal, then so be it. Loyalty comes in many forms. I think Eddie's quite clever in how he takes almost an open window approach to making some of the decisions, and that window gets bigger and gets smaller as it suits when people are making a bit of a noise. And then what happens out of all of that is some of the changes he makes outside of that window of ideas suddenly go under the radar a little bit and then get picked up on in retrospect. And people go, oh, bloody hell, have you seen this? For example, Trippier moving into midfield, allowing Bruno to go further forward. And that was picked up on after the event. Yeah. And it was never discussed ahead of time. It was never discussed, you know, in any of the pre-match conversation. And he gets away with that very, very well. He uses that very well. But he's loyal to players sometimes who seem out of favour. And I'll give you a great example. Alan St. Maximin. And the gentleman to my left on the screen has seen the evidence of these things. I could give you, off the top of my head, 4 examples. 4. 2 during COVID and 2 post-COVID. Where Eddie Howe would have been absolutely within his rights to chuck St. Maximin under the bus. Where the club would have been well within their rights to chuck St. Maximin under the bus. While there was a social media love-in on him and he could do no wrong for some people. One of the reasons I was always skeptical about where he was going was because some of the things I was hearing that he was getting up to outside of the pitch and off the pitch and surrounding travel and in and coming in and out the country willy-nilly and doing things with and without the club's permission. And I'm aware of four examples that if I could cut loose, off the top of my head, I could give you 4. If I sat and thought about it, it would probably go up to 8. Whereby we've got pretty hard evidence that the club had every right to chuck him under the bus if they'd really want to. And nobody did, including Eddie Howe. And in fact, there was times on the back of some of those things, Eddie Howe was telling them all how important he was to the club and how important he was to the squad, and he was a game changer and he was this, that and the other. So loyalty comes in many forms and it cuts both ways. Does Eddie Howe become less of a manager because he's been loyal to a player in that respect? Versus does he become any less of a manager if he's loyal to a player who he believes works well within his system and he wants to stick with it? It's difficult. we're not party to what he sees week in, week out. I think his tendency is to try and protect young players, and that's where I think Lewis Mailey's been a genuine sort of the exception to prove the rule almost, where he's come in and he hasn't looked out of place, and he's had backing of the rest of the squad and have supported him and helped him develop and grow. I don't think that's Eddie's style to chuck kids in like that, but in some respects we haven't had much choice. In other respects, again, what do we talk about in terms of what is loyalty from a manager towards players? And as I say, I think it comes in many forms. I do think Eddie's loyal to a fault sometimes. I don't know how he kept his mouth shut. Certainly about one of the incidents with St. Maximin. I'm afraid I wouldn't have just chucked him under the bus. I would have tied him to the bloody railroad tracks. But equally, that's the mark of the man. And managing professional footballers and managing how they behave and how they want to behave, it's a very different world. It's a very different group set to, in some respects, what, say, for example, Cloughie had to deal with going to Leeds United. But yet in other ways, it isn't that much different, really. And yes, I think he can be loyal to a fault. But at the end of the day, any manager stands or falls by the decisions he makes on the pitch, whether loyalty is involved or not. I think that at the end of the day is how any manager will be perceived to succeed or fail.
It's funny you should say that. It's funny you should say that, Mitch, because I listened to the Wayne Rooney podcast yesterday, where at one point he talked about Louis van Gaal, and he said how much he enjoyed Louis van Gaal. He learned an awful lot out of him, etc., etc. But he said that quite a lot of the other players didn't. And I think it was the Louis van Gaal with some of the younger players, which was the start of Manchester United's big problems that have obviously ensued with player power. But it was interesting that the one player that you thought would have been really at the top of the player power would have been Rooney, but he wasn't. But what Rooney said was with Van Gaal, he had some strange ways, and this is what managers do. And he explained that when you went in for lunch, it even got to the point where Van Gaal would have a 3-course lunch and the players had to sit and wait until he'd finished, and then he would get up and say a few words before anyone was left. Because he controlled them in that way, but he lost out in other ways. And it's this fine dividing line that a manager has, how close he is to the players, how distant he becomes from the players. Mourinho was totally the opposite when he went into Man U. And you look back in Newcastle's days and you think of Arthur Cox, and the players said, and McGarry created all sorts of issues among players, set players off against each other. Arthur Cox ruled with a rod of iron. But then when Kevin came with Terry McDermott, it loosened up a bit, and he gave them leeway, but other players got it in the neck. It's just the way managers are, and we've just got, it's one of those things. But I think we never really know what goes on behind the scenes and how much some of it's a front and some of it is very much a power struggle. And I think if a manager's involved in a power struggle, that's when he starts to really struggle. Because normally there's only one set of winners when it comes to that, unless you're a very, very strong character. And if you start to lose the fan base, then it becomes even more difficult for a manager.
Exactly. And I think that's the danger with Dan Burn, is Dan Burn's on the tipping edge of being hounded by fans. I mean, there was people shouting Tino before he was substituted. And that's the danger. And that could be picked up by others, not just Eddie Howe. And perhaps it's not a fair comparison, but it's not a bad one. Look at the way Bobby Robson tried to protect Dyer. And what did he get back for it? Nothing but shame, because the idiot wouldn't accept what Bobby was trying to do with him was a good thing, and ended up refusing to play for him, didn't he? So it's he's got to be careful. I mean, I love the guy's done a fantastic job. But I think that is a good question. I mean, I didn't.
Yeah, it was good
because it was a long one, but it's a good one. It's fair comment, I think.
Evening to Rich. He says, Hal mentioned not being able to say much regards Premier League kick-off times. Obviously, Premier League brought the TV companies not being able to pick Wednesday Euro teams for a Saturday lunch kick-off. Must bring in similar for away fans. Just a lot going on in the chat about the kick-off time. We've discussed that on the show previously. But, 8 o'clock on a Saturday night's crazy. And even the Arsenal fan in the chat agrees with us on that score as well. Sean asked us to read his message out as well, so I've had to highlight it. There we go. He says, I'm just back from being out of touch. However, you guys are the most interesting, informative, and most informative channel, second to none. And trust me, I've dipped into the other channels. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, mate. And Sean mentioned earlier as well, a different Sean. We talked about Ashley and Charney earlier. He says South Korea's new manager, he hopes. Bruce constantly picked a player that's struggling. He'd get dogs abuse. You're right, Sean. You're right. Yeah. That's just the way football. That's the way football runs as well. And Ben,
the only difference I'd say about that is he's the one and only manager I've ever seen blame anybody else.
Yeah, he would have chucked them under the bus, mind as well.
Ben, good evening. Hi, lads. The two more important games Tuesday, but EPL, we still can finish sixth, methinks, in Europe, and hoping Isaac and Will are back here. Looks as if they probably will be as well. Okay, we are coming towards the back end of the show, and as always, we have some regular features from a couple of Newcastle fans who do some sterling work. First of all, we've got Scunny Mag. He gives us the away day guide. He's combined two. He's got the Arsenal game and the Blackburn game in one report. So here we go.
Evening, ladies and gents. Another double bill coming up as we're away to Arsenal and Blackburn in the next few days. I've done all the hard work. You enjoy the games. It's coming up next. Okay, so the Emirates. Most of us will be using public transport to get closer to the stadium, even if we are driving in. The Underground's by far the easiest way to go, and for those using that, it's worth noting Holloway Road, nearest tube station to the Emirates, it's actually closed on match days. That one's on the Piccadilly line, but so is Finsbury Park and Arsenal Station, and you can use both of those, and you should be able to get there directly from King's Cross. If you've come into another park and ride and you find yourself on the Victoria line, you can get off at Highbury and Islington, which is also handy for the ground. Those three will leave you between 10 and 20 minute walk depending on which one. For pubs for that one, think Super Park is your what three words that will get you outside the Dolphin pub, which is the base for the London branch of the supporters club, and it's literally just around the corner. It's 2 minutes walk from King's Cross Station. They're always really well set up whenever we visit. Everyone takes over the street outside. They always have plenty of staff on, and they're used to serving crowds quickly and well. Closer to the ground, it's very limited, but you might be lucky in either the Blackstock or the 12 pins. First one is Party Boring Gasp, and the 12 pins is Lanes Riders Forced, and those are just across the junction from each other, just outside the Finsbury Park tube station. They do tend to only accept small groups of visiting fans though. When you head down to the stadium, you want to be on the south east corner of the ground. You need to head over the railway bridges to get there. Best one for the away end can be found at Corner Edit Nest. Then just follow the black and white shirts over the bridge and to the away turnstiles. And once Saturday night's done and out of the way, we move on to Blackburn on the Tuesday. If you're heading to Ewood Park, there's limited street parking, but there are a bunch of pop-up football special car parks at around £5 each in the surrounding businesses in the streets and that, all within a reasonable distance of the ground. The club do have a car park itself. They're charging £10 a vehicle, but the Fenhurst Lodge, just around the corner from the away end, has limited spaces, but it's only £5 a head. Convenient for the ground, but traffic can be really bad on Bolton Road afterwards. Downside to parking here is you might not get a quick getaway. And whilst we're talking about the Fenhurst, this is the official away pub, a minute's walk of the away end. Officially, they adopt an anti-singing policy with football fans, which is weird. But as I recall a few years ago, during our championship campaign, those anti-chant requests fell on deaf ears. But that having been said, it's also a hotel, and it's probably the best place to stay if you are going to be staying over, if you can get in there because of its proximity to the stadium, parking, it's attached to the away pub. Everything else, it just works. It'll set you back about £70 to £80 for the night, and you can find all of this at Half Crest Washed, but it does get very busy. Further afield, you'll find the Golden Cup. It's just off the M65, Bravo Bravo 30 Alpha Juliet, or Casual Drop Trials for your what three words. This does get really busy as well. It's a much more lively atmosphere. These lot don't mind you singing, but it is a 20-minute walk to the stadium from there, and it's not a massive hill, but it's an uphill incline all the way. For those coming in on train, there's a Spoons in the town called the Postal Order, which you'll find on Darwin Street at Bravo Bravo 2 Bravo Yankee, or Rewarding recording slap sudden. There is a closer train station to the stadium. It's called Mill Hill. You get there from Blackburn, and it takes a few minutes on the train, and then it's a 15-minute walk to the ground from there. And if you're getting into the area early, they do host a fan zone outside the away end. It's open to both sets of supporters, and it's not bad for what it is. They've got food and drink, and it's definitely better than the excuse Leeds put on for a fan zone. You'll find the away end and that fan zone at dangerously nasal adults. That's it from me. Here's hoping we're sitting here in the quarterfinals this time next week, and we've avoided a replay. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, dangerously nasal adults. That's my favourite what three words this week. Up next, Toontalk.
Hello everyone, with some quick stats before the big game tomorrow. Newcastle away to Arsenal. Arsenal is 11 games unbeaten at the Emirates against Newcastle. Actually, it's 10 wins in a row before the 0-0 draw last year in January. And Arsenal holds their record for most clean sheets in the Premier League against Newcastle, 30 games without conceding a goal. It's no surprise actually, given this stat, that the last player to score at the Emirates in any game against Arsenal away is Jose Perez back in 2014, 10 years ago in December, or 777 minutes without scoring there. Funnily enough, however, Newcastle has kept 3 clean sheets in the last 4 games against the Gunners, winning twice at home and the 0-0 draw last year, and only 1 loss at St. James's Park in May. Arsenal themselves have started the calendar year very strong with 5 wins. For the first time in their entire history, they start the calendar year with 5 wins from 5 games. And Bukayo Saka has scored in 4 consecutive games, the most since Olivier Giroud for Arsenal back in 2015. On Newcastle side, Kieran Trippier leads the assists in the Premier League with 10, not bad for a fullback. And we have the chance to do our first double over Arsenal since 1994-1995, when certain Peter Beardsley destroyed Arsenal in both games. Let's see what happens tomorrow, and away the lads.
Great stuff. Thanks as always to Andre Toontalk for his update as well. So Newcastle do go to Arsenal tomorrow, 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday night. The game is live on TNT Sports. It is a sellout. Random ID checks, which is what Steve was mentioning earlier on, will take place tomorrow. If you are affected, you need to visit the Southwest Collection Office to show your ID and receive a working ticket. Following the 1-0 win on Tyneside, controversial according to Arteta in the season, Newcastle, as Andre mentioned, have got the chance to have a Premier League double over the Gunners for the first time since 94-95. Last season's 0-0 draw at Arsenal ended a run of 11 successive league and cup defeats in North London. But our wait for a goal continues, and this is a crazy stat: 777 minutes without a goal at Arsenal. Perez was the last person to score there back in 2014. Nick Pope, Joe Linton, Callum Wilson, Matt Targett and Sandro Tonali all out. The good news today was that Fabian Schär has trained all week and he is okay. Had no ill effects from his painful looking wrist last Saturday. Joe Willock, Alexander Isak are both anticipated to be in the squad. They've trained this week and will have trained today. Elliot Anderson and Matt Targett are both also coming close to a return, although neither have trained this week. There is still the threat of a suspension hanging over 2 players. Bruno, of course, 1 more yellow and he misses 2 games. And Anthony Gordon is 2 yellow cards away from the same fate. What did we learn from Arteta's press conference? Well, Timber remains out. Partey, Zizou, Zinchenko and Tomiyasu are all doubtful at this stage. Obviously, Arsenal had a game midweek, Wednesday night. Eddie Howe said in the press conference he doesn't think that makes much of a difference, especially when you've got a squad like Arsenal's and you can rotate it. But it was a game all the same. Maybe, tiredness may play its part. Who knows? This is Arsenal's 13th Premier League home game of the season. They've won 9, they've drawn 2, and they've lost 1 of the last 12. Fulham and Spurs both took points in 2-2 draws. West Ham won 2-0 down there in the London derby. Referee tomorrow, well, it's Paul Tierney, another debutant as far as Newcastle United is concerned this season. Last time we had him officiating the game was the 2-1 Premier League win at Notts Forest in March 2023. And VAR, which is often switched off in Newcastle games, is Peter Banks. So, George, where we're going with this game, for me, I think there'll be goals tomorrow. Again, it depends on who he picks. We know who's available. We know what options he's got. I'd love to see him be brave tomorrow and change things. I'd love to see him play Trippier at left back and play Livramento at right back and completely swap things around and just give Dan Burn a break from this problem that he's in, and go for it tomorrow. I think if we made a change like that, I think Newcastle could come away with something tomorrow. I think it could be a high-scoring game. I think Newcastle could win 3-2, and I think they could chuck in another controversial VAR decision as well, just to give Arteta something to stew on until the end of the season. But I don't think he will. I think he'll probably play Dan Burn, and I think it's going to be a hard watch this tomorrow night. But give us your views, George, on what you think.
Well, if the team that played in the first half at Newcastle on Saturday goes out, we're in for a shellacking. Absolute shellacking. I can't say anything other. And I'm Mr. Positive usually. I don't want to see my team go and get beaten and then get a shellacking. But that first half team on Saturday was nowhere to be seen. We couldn't afford that at the Emirates against Arsenal. So, and you've raised the elephant in the room for me today, because everybody's talking about the left back and Dan Burn situation. We've got a full back who regularly plays left back for his country, Trippier, and yet we seem to ignore that. And if that's a way of getting Tino into the team, well, I'm with you. Let's give it a go. And what better place to try it than Arsenal, because Trippier would be up directly against one of his teammates, wouldn't he? A teammate he probably knows an awful lot about. So, yeah, I would like to see him have a go for it as well. But my fear is that if he's too loyal, and we get the team that was in that first half on Saturday, then gosh, we're going to have a tough night. We're going to have a hard night. It's not going to be an easy night, whoever plays. But if they can somehow discover the quality that they had at Aston Villa, for example, then we could give Arsenal a good game. I'm like you. I'm optimistic enough to think that they'll find that and give Arsenal a difficult time. More than anything, I would like to see that. But so many ifs and buts. But yes, I think you're right. Let's give it a go, because against Arsenal, just let them hammer away, then the result's inevitable, I think. You've got to give them something to think about. And when we've done well there, that's what we've done. Shouldn't really forget either that last year we're the only team in the Premiership that Arsenal didn't score against. But I have a fancy all right on that one as well. It's a game that cries goals, isn't it? I mean, we've been criticising our team, but the one thing we haven't been doing is not scoring goals. The opposite, we've been getting goals when we need them. And certainly Arsenal's putting them in for toffee at the minute, fives and fives all the way along the line. So, yeah, I'd like to see him have a go, but my worry is if he decides on the same old, and we fall back into what we did in the first half against Bournemouth, then we're in for a tough night. But I'd like to see. I think we've got a chance.
Well, I stuck my neck out last night. I've said 3-2. Newcastle's going to win 3-2 tomorrow, and I know Newcastle will score goals. I'm taking a gamble there because, like Supermax said last night, we don't know what team he's going to go with. Yeah. But if Willock and Isak are going to be involved in some way, shape, or form, it gives us some more attacking options. Isak scores. Isak will score tomorrow if he's available tomorrow.
And you're naming two players that have the one thing that gives you hope. That's pace. They've got pace.
We've got Harvey Barnes. We've got Harvey Barnes in there as well. Arsenal will be looking at this and going, actually, this is more difficult than we think. Anthony Gordon, Bruno Guimaraes, Isak, Willock, and Harvey Barnes are all potentially available tomorrow, along with Lewis Miley, Almiron. From an attacking point of view tomorrow, plus Trippier, 10 assists, as Andre mentioned, Toontalk mentioned there. So from our perspective, Newcastle have got, we might be a little bit ropey at the back at the minute, but we've got attacking options. You chuck Livramento into the mix tomorrow, you know, Newcastle could have Arsenal on the back foot. It's why I've predicted a 3-2. You know, naive to think that Newcastle won't concede goals tomorrow. But let's go for it and let's get that win. And we always play well when our backs are against the wall. People are writing Newcastle off today. People saying that Newcastle got no chance. It could be 6 or 7. I think 3-2. So what's your prediction, George, before we go to Steve?
I was going to go for 2-1. Us 2-1.
2-1 to Newcastle. Okay, that's 2 wins on the top row. Steve, how do you see this game panning out?
It's interesting. People are talking personnel, but I think a big thing is actually how Eddie sets the team up, regardless of who the personnel is. Whether he plays with a tighter midfield, how he uses the wings, which players that he has up front, how he adopts and uses the pace of either an Almiron or a Barnes, and Gordon, whether that's the combination he goes for up front, whether Isak is fit to start, whether you risk him. But I think we can stifle them. There's no question about that. And I think we've done it to a number of teams this season, especially away from home. And we can get results with goals on the break. We can control a game that way. Arsenal are the sort of team when they go behind who'll then react and come at you gung ho, and who knows what gaps will then appear. They've got some fantastic footballers. I don't think they're firing on all cylinders. They've had some great results, I must admit. You know, they seem to have gone through a phase of scoring for fun, and then went right off their form on Wednesday night in the Champions League game that they should have absolutely, you know, won at a canter. Didn't even have a shot on goal. That's the sort of Arsenal that I think's probably frustrated some of their fans for long periods under Arteta now. I think if it's the choices that Eddie Howe has that are going to make the difference, isn't it? Does he go for Burner? Does he go for Livramento? Does he go for Barnes instead of Almiron? Does he go for Barnes instead of bringing Isak straight back in and pushes Gordon down the middle? How effective would that front three without Isak be against their defensive four? How effective will a midfield of Miley and Longstaff be with Bruno playing a little bit further and more advanced against the like of a Rice, who tends to sit back, but if you give him the space, you can drag him all over the place if you want to. It's whether Howe goes out and decides, right, this is what I want you to do, and you to do, and then to get his flair players to exploit the gaps and the spaces. I've always felt, and since Christmas, that when Dan Burn came back in, I felt that Shaw was pushing too far over on the right, which was then creating gaps. And I thought that because of that, as I said earlier, Burn tended to have to tuck in a little bit further because I don't think Botman has the pace that he had. I think he's still recovering from and still carrying something with that knee injury. And I think that there's just a link that's missing between the three of those. Especially when the situation has come for pushing Trippier further forward. And I think that's affected Dan Burn and affected the space because I don't think he gets the support. But it's going to be very much a tactical game. And I think Eddie can outthink Arteta tomorrow. And I think that we can come away with at least a point. I was going to go for 2-2, believe it or not. I thought it was one of those games where there'll be goals from both teams. And I was going for a 2-2 draw, Steve.
2-2 draw. Okay, we all think there's going to be goals. Then, by the sounds of it, Mitch, what's your take on this game? What do you think Eddie's going to do tomorrow? It's easy for me to ask you, but can you think about? Is he going to make that change? Is he going to go for Dan Burn tomorrow? Is he going to bring Isak and Willock in?
I don't care. The one thing I want to see from us tomorrow is old school shithousery from the kickoff. They're obsessed. They're obsessed with us about revenge. The fan base is, the whole club is, Arteta still is. That's not a good mindset to go into a game with. And that can be exploited. And I tell you who showed with the way was Porto in midweek. In midweek, they were done with all the tricks in the European book, and they couldn't handle it. And they stopped playing football. They stopped playing football because they were too busy trying to deal with being shithoused by a well-organised European team that give them what everybody used to say you expect to get when you go away from home in Europe. Let's give them a taste of that again and see what happens. I could see them having somebody sent off within 20 minutes because the crowd will be pumped up, the team will be pumped up. Money on the first 2 footer on Bruno.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm telling you now, that's how we got an in here. Because we're already in the head. We've been in the head for 117 days. That's still in some parts of their fan base going on about the goal at St James's Park and being done and being cheated. God, I would love to go down there, and I would hope it's with a goal given onside by VAR when somebody's patently half a mile off. And I will spend the rest of the week in a body cast because I'll literally split me sides. But that's what I would quite like to see. I'd just like to see we go there and give them one. Let's stick it up them. Let's give them what they want. We're horrible and we're physical and we're cheats and we're okay. Let's see.
Have some of
let's
that.
see what kind of reaction we get. Because I'm telling you now, it'll not be pretty.
Prediction on the dice and a prediction from you, Mitch.
Prediction from me, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
1-1
from the
draw,
dice,
which predicted a defeat last week. It's definitely broke. Definitely broken.
Predicting a defeat again. 3-1 to the Arsenal.
3-1 to the Arsenal. Okay. There we go then. There's your predictions. We have got time to squeeze in everybody who watches this show's favourite piece of music. Here you go. The day I met, we asked you to send in photographs of you meeting somebody famous from Newcastle United, past or present. And a big thanks to Kevin for sending this one in, where he's meeting a guy called George Mitchell. Fantastic. George, great of Kevin to send this in. Tell us about this picture.
Well, this is Kevin Keegan presenting me with me Sports Council Ambassador Award. And it gives us a chance to pay tribute to another Mr. Newcastle, Malcolm Dix, because I was to discover some years later it was actually Malcolm Dix that nominated me from Newcastle Sports Council. And he and I used to, as ambassadors for the Sports Council, if I should explain, we were asked by the Sports Council to go and vet people who applied for the money and for money for sports equipment and sports arenas and football grounds, rugby grounds, cricket grounds, bowls, tennis. And Malcolm Dix and I used to travel all over the north of England, north of Liverpool and up to the Scottish border. I used to have some great trips for Malcolm. Everybody thinks he was just Mr. Newcastle. He wasn't. He was a great sportsman, and his sports council work was legendary. And I really enjoyed working with Malcolm doing that. And around this area, if you go to Percy Park, you go to Preston Tennis Club, you go to North Shields Bowls, go up to Berwick Rangers, Percy Park Rugby Club I've mentioned. There's lots of sports clubs. Wouldn't have got a tosser from Sport England if it hadn't been for Malcolm Dix in many ways. So that was great. The other story is that when Neil's sitting there, when I was awarded this, I said to him, it was at the gates of Civic Centre, and I said, "Are you coming? There's a free lunch for you." But he was busy at the university. I think it was your last year, was it, Neil?
It was, aye.
He was in his last year at the university, decided he wouldn't come. And because we didn't know who was going to make the presentation. And it was just by chance. I went out to the bog, and when I came back, there was a door open, and I got a sneaky look through the crack in the door, and there was Kevin Keegan. And I rung our Neil and I said, "It's Kevin Keegan," but unfortunately, Neil was too busy; he couldn't come out. So that's what it's about. But the big bit for me is that I was awarded that largely because of Malcolm Dix. And I really did get a lot of pride and pleasure out of that. But so did the Northeast. The Northeast got a lot of money they wouldn't have got if it hadn't been for us too.
Yeah, well done, and God bless Malcolm Dix. What a
Yeah.
top man he was. Time for a quick joke before we finish. We were so poor when I was young, and I once had a birthday party at the local laundrette. The highlight was playing Pass the Parcel. Thanks, Elliot. Excellent stuff. And that is a wrap, as they say on the movie sets. Thanks to Mitch, thanks to Steve, and thanks to George. Thanks to
everybody.
Johnny Mag, and thanks to Toon Stato. But thanks to you for watching. We are back in the morning. I honestly advise you, tune into this one. It's absolutely brilliant. 10:30 in the morning. The supporters group show, which we started a few weeks back with different people on from around the world, is the Iceland Supporters Club. It is brilliant. What a couple of characters we have unearthed on there, by the way. Great to have them on.
Am I allowed to upset you in, Steve?
If you want, just before we finish.
See you later, Emily. See you later, Emily.
Okay, guys, enjoy the game this weekend, and we will be back live 6 o'clock Sunday with the professionals. Take care, guys. See you later.
Everybody.
Cheers, everyone.